I'm working on this plaque here, kind of a wall hanging sort of thing. You can see I've got the positive design pretty much done here, and now I'm working on the background, which is just repeating parallel lines to form the contrast background against the positive image of the main design. So you can see it's a lot of just kind of the same thing over and over, these four-sided chips, just at different lengths, but mostly all the same thing. But in these corners here by the tail of the fish, there's some interesting stuff going on, so kind of show you what I'm doing with this. And the first thing to note is with these chips that all line up and they form this line, I want to make sure that they do form a clean line and line up nicely against that edge. So one way that I do that is by carving a continuous cut from this side to this side to make sure that I'm basically carving a single line across that. And with square chips, like this one kind of approximates, the bottom point is going to be about there symmetrically between the two corners, but on these, since it's skewed, they're asymmetrical, so the knife is going to make a tighter angle here on the top part, and then a wider angle at the bottom of those chips. So the middle point is still going to be halfway between the two parallel lines there, but it's going to be offset from the middle of those two. So I drew those lines to kind of show what the tip of the knife is going to be doing in the wood as I carve those down. So then I'll lift the knife up and then just continue down as I get to the next chip to make sure that I have a nice continuous line across this area. I need to be careful on this last one so I don't cut through this central ridge there. So this first one's a little bit simpler, ends up being just a triangular three-corner chip, pretty standard. And so then on this, the first cut, the edge of the knife follows that line. Now on the second cut, the tip of the blade is going to go down along that line that I drew and that I ended up cutting on that first cut. So, like I said, you'll see for the first several of these that I'll be doing, it's kind of just the same thing repeated over and over. Which doesn't make for the most interesting carving session on my part as a carver, but I think that this simple repeating background does a good job of being kind of interesting as chip carving, but without distracting too much from the main design. You'll notice these chips are actually pretty big as well, pretty wide, and I do have to put some effort into carving these, but it helps that they're straight lines, so a little bit easier to navigate the difficulties of deep chips that also have curves. And as these get longer, like these ones toward the corner, I do have to make sure to keep the knife straight and follow along that long ridge. Okay, so got those first 4 done, and now we get to a little bit more interesting part here where these rectangles, basically I'm cutting out, interfere with the design of the fishtail here, so I have to kind of change it up and make it look like it's still these continuous lines behind the fish design. But basically the lines of the pattern mostly take care of that for me, so here as it starts to come in, as with any other chip, I'll draw the knife out of it since it gets skinnier and shallower as I go. And then kind of an extra cut here to go down and line those up. There we go. So, not too surprisingly, that complication with the fish design kind of left a little bit more to clean up here at the end, but not too big of a deal. And I got a little bit more off my mark than I wanted to, so I'm going to just come back and redo that a little bit. Alright, so first part of that's done there, and I'll go ahead and do the same thing along this single edge here that I did on here to get that nice continuous cut. And I do want to be careful as I do that, as I get to this part on the lines where I'm not really cutting. I want to make sure I don't get underneath that line with the tip of the knife too much, because that'll create some undercutting on this thin part of the chip that could lead to losing some, having pieces chip out and fall out. Alright, and this one's a little bit simpler again since it's just got the straight line on the back end here. And then now here's another one that the tail just barely comes in on the corner there. So I'll have to go around that. And I'm actually going to go straight across farther than I have to, just to make sure that I get the point of the knife down there where I need to. And then there's a point right here where these lines intersect. It's not a smooth transition, so there's actually going to be a crease right here where those two cuts come together. So I'm going to start too far again, follow that curved line, and then stop. I'm going to resume it along the straight line and go down hopefully to that same point that I just stopped at. Bit off target there. Go back and get back on the line. Now here with that fishtail coming in, it actually makes the chip a little bit shallower right there. So I'm going to draw the knife up to make sure I don't cut through that, and then come back down on the other side and see what I've got now. So now you can see what I was talking about, where that tail comes in there, interferes with the shape of that cut that I would have otherwise been making. Okay, and then when I moved over to this next chip, I skipped this little sliver here that actually is part of this continuous line that it would be. So I'm going to go back and finish that one. You'll see, at least for me, I don't know how much of a issue it is for others, but with these long straight lines I do often end up coming off of the line that I intend, but I make sure that if I do that I'm coming inside the chip that I'm going to be removing, so I can always go back and get closer to the line if I want to. I want to make sure I don't come over the line, because then I'll be messing up the ridge and coming into the part of the wood that I want to keep intact. I can always just come back and kind of fillet off a smaller section there. And then the rest of these are just going to be more of the same. Those four-sided chips, nice long ridges. So I'll spare you watching that. You've seen some of that. And hope you enjoyed.